Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Munib Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the headlines first. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says Kashmiris braving Indian oppression should be inspired by the martyrs of Karbala to stay firm in their resolve. In a series of tweets, Khan said their struggle against tyranny and injustice will succeed. This comes as authorities in occupied valley impose restrictions to prevent Muharram processions. Dozens of mourners have been wounded in a military crackdown on processions. Afghan political leader Bulletin HEKMATYAR says India is supporting the Afghan government to sabotage the Afghan peace process. Delivering a prayer sermon, HEKMATYAR said Indian militants are forming militia groups in the northern parts of Afghanistan. The Hizb-e-Islami leader said India opposes the peace process due to New Delhi's rivalry with Pakistan. The coronavirus has infected over 25 million people, claiming more than 842,000 lives across the globe. The United States is the worst-hit country, followed by Brazil, Mexico and India. India's caseload has exceeded 3.5 million after it registered nearly 79,000 infections overnight, the world's highest single-day surge so far. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 4 people lost their lives overnight, taking the death toll to 6,288 among over 295,000 cases. In the US, one person has been shot dead as protesters from rival groups clash in Portland. Police have launched a probe into the incident. Tensions between rival groups have roiled Portland for nearly 3 months following the custodial death of George Floyd. In Lebanon, Hezbollah says the group will avenge the killing of its fighters in Syria by slaying Israeli soldiers. In a televised address, Hezbollah's leader, Syed Hassan Nasrallah, said the group will not be drawn into clashes on the Lebanon-Israel border. News in detail after a short break. Stay tuned. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says Kashmiris braving Indian oppression should be inspired by the martyrs of Karbala to stay firm in their resolve. In a series of tweets, Khan said their struggle against tyranny and injustice will succeed. Prime Minister Imran Khan's tweets come as authorities in occupied valley impose strict restrictions to prevent Muharram processions. Dozens of mourners have been wounded in a military crackdown on processions. Separately, Indian troops have martyred 10 Kashmiris during so-called fake encounters in the last 2 days. This brings the death toll from violence by Indian forces to nearly 300 since India revoked the special status of occupied Kashmir last year. Yesterday, Pakistan's Foreign Office strongly condemned the extrajudicial killings of Kashmiris at the hands of Indian troops and urged the international community to hold India accountable over its crimes against Kashmiris. Afghan political leader Bulletin HEKMATYAR says India is supporting the Afghan government to sabotage the Afghan peace process. Delivering a prayer sermon, HEKMATYAR said Indian militants are forming militia groups in the northern parts of Afghanistan. The Hizb-e-Islami leader said India opposes the peace process due to New Delhi's rivalry with Pakistan. He warned that India's actions will have dangerous consequences for Afghanistan. However, he said the Taliban agreement with the United States will be implemented. This comes as National Peace Council Director Abdullah Abdullah previously announced the start of the intra-Afghan talks in Qatar for the coming week. Now, the coronavirus has infected over 25 million people, claiming more than 842,000 lives across the globe. The United States is the worst-hit country, followed by Brazil, Mexico and India. India's caseload has exceeded 3.5 million after it registered nearly 79,000 infections overnight. the world's highest single-day surge so far. This report has details.
The novel coronavirus refuses to show any signs of abating, especially in the US and Brazil. The number of cases in the US continues to rise while the authorities have eased several key protective restrictions in the country. Meanwhile, Brazil remains in the ice storm as the death toll in the country crosses 120,000 after 758 more died overnight. Colombia has also posted a surge in new cases, while some restrictions have been eased under pressure from the public. The authorities have since warned citizens that the pandemic is not yet over, urging them to take precautions.
Colombia is currently in first and second place with Chile in the Latin America that does more tests per 1 million inhabitants. When we do more tests, we have more cases. But screenings are just the tip of the iceberg because people are becoming asymptomatic. So people with symptoms already have a 30% coronavirus positivity rate, but those with mild to moderate symptoms are also tested as well as those without symptoms who can also spread the disease.
South Korea reported triple-digit new infections for the 17th consecutive day as the government swiftly imposed restrictions in Seoul. China has reported 9 new imported infections, while no new locally transmitted cases. Elsewhere, New Zealanders are treading cautiously after marking a resurgence of infections. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says public gatherings will remain limited and the restrictions will be eased only with a fall in the number of cases.
If you're in Auckland, I strongly encourage you to wear a mask. If you take public transport, you must wear a mask. We remain in a strong position relative to the rest of the world, with lower numbers of cases, with a strong public health system. But that will only take us so far. We need the team of 5 million to help us get back where we need to be.
Over in Europe, citizens in London, Berlin, Paris, Vienna and Zurich held anti-COVID rallies where some called the virus a hoax. Berlin saw the largest rally where some 40,000 protested what they called the infringement of human liberty under new restrictions. The German authorities made hundreds of arrests after banning the rallies, citing pandemic spread risks.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, the COVID-19 continues to decline as 4 people lost their lives in the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry says 264 more people tested positive for the virus overnight after yesterday's 319. The ministry says the number of active cases has fallen below 9,000. It said more than 280,000 have recovered, accounting for over 94%. The number of confirmed cases stands just over 295,000 with a death toll of 6,288. Sindh remains the worst hit province, witnessing nearly 129,000 infections, while Punjab has reported over 96,000 cases so far. Now, the week-long negotiations in Geneva aimed at drafting a new constitution for Syria have ended with an agreement to meet for further talks. UN Special Envoy for Syria, Geir Pedersen, said the talks were challenging, but the 45-member Constitutional Committee engaged in substantive negotiations. Pedersen said a ceasefire brokered in March by Turkey and Russia in northwest Idlib continues despite violations. The opposition's co-chair of the committee, Hadi al-Bahra, says a nationwide ceasefire is essential to revive the country's political process. The UN-led committee met for the 3rd time after a break over COVID-19 following 3 members testing positive. A date for the next meeting is yet to be announced. Now, the United Nations has called for a full and inclusive political process in Libya. In a statement, the UN support mission in Libya said it observed an increase in reports of human rights violations. The mission said prolific use of hate speech and incitement to violence are dividing the Libyans. It said such violations increase polarization and tear apart the country's social fabric. Earlier, the US lauded its close partnership with Libyan Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj. In a tweet, the US embassy called for cooperation in interest of providing good governance to the Libyan people. Meanwhile, the government in Tripoli has appointed a new defense minister and army chief after protests against poor public services and living conditions. Moving on, Israel says its tanks have targeted multiple locations in the southern Gaza Strip. The Israeli Defense Ministry said it struck Hamas posts in retaliation to incendiary balloon attacks. There were no immediate reports of casualties on both sides. Hamas has not yet responded to the Israeli claims. Israel has carried out almost daily attacks in Gaza since August 6. Meanwhile, in Lebanon, Hezbollah says the group will avenge the killing of its fighters in Syria by slaying Israeli soldiers. In a televised address, Hezbollah's leader Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah said the group will not be drawn into clashes on the Israel border, as this is what Tel Aviv wants. Nasrallah also called on the Lebanese government to announce the results of the investigation into the Beirut port blast. Nasrallah said the group is ready for peaceful dialogue for a new political process in the country. Earlier this week, Israel's defense ministry said it struck posts belonging to the Lebanon-based group. Now, Azerbaijan has accused Russia of supplying weapons to Armenia since a clash between the two former Soviet republics in July. An Azeri presidential aide says Moscow also sent its strategic airlifters towards Armenia after the 17th of July. Russia told Azerbaijan those transport aircraft were carrying building materials, but Azerbaijan's presidential office says Baku is not satisfied with this answer. Over a dozen Armenian and Azeri soldiers were killed in July at the border between the two countries. Russia has a military base in Armenia and considers it a strategic partner in the South Caucasus region. Muslims around the globe are taking part in the largest religious mourning processions. The day marks the martyrdom of Prophet Muhammad's grandson Imam Hussein in the Battle of Karbala in southern Iraq. Hundreds of thousands of pilgrims from the world head to Karbala at Imam Hussein's shrine to mark the Ashura. This year, amid the coronavirus pandemic, the scaled-back gatherings will be held while taking the necessary precautions. The Muharram commemoration symbolized the eternal and unwavering stance of truth against falsehood. It represents humanity's struggle against injustice, tyranny and oppression, for which Imam Hussein sacrificed himself and his family. More news coming up after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back now. Moving on with the news stories. In the United States, one person has been shot dead as protesters from rival groups clashed near Clackamas Town Centre in northwest Portland. Police said a homicide investigating into the incident at Black Lives Matter demonstrations is underway. The police said they are not currently releasing the suspect information. Earlier, security officials said a political rally is caravanning throughout downtown Portland and they have made some arrests after violence reports. Local media says a pro-Trump vehicle rally began near Clackamas Town Centre before reaching Portland. It said clashes broke out between President Donald Trump's supporters and counter-protesters. Meanwhile, Jacob Blake is set to attend his first court hearing from his hospital bed next week. The African-American's lawyer says Blake's plans to plead not guilty to all charges of unlawful entry, theft and sexual assault. Still in the United States, President Trump's administration has halted in-person security briefings to the Congress, citing possible security leaks from Capitol Hill. Addressing media, President Trump said National Intelligence Director John Ratcliffe made the decision over concerns for election security. Trump said the administration is fed up of the leaks and presenting incorrect information as the truth. White House's move has raised concern among legislators about the people's right to know about possible foreign meddling in the upcoming presidential elections. But White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows says legislators will be sent full written readouts to ensure proper oversight. Earlier, U.S. counterintelligence chief William Evanina alleged Russia was trying to interfere in the U.S. presidential elections in November. The U.S. has accused Russian jets of making unsafe and unprofessional intercept of its aircraft flying over the Black Sea. In a statement, the Department of Defense said a U.S. Air Force B-52 bomber was conducting routine operations. It said the Russian jets crossed within 100 feet multiple times, causing turbulence and restricting B-52's ability to maneuver. The statement said actions like these can cause collisions and are inconsistent with good airmanship and global flight rules. Earlier, the Russian Defense Control Center said their pilots acted in strict compliance with the international air law while pushing back the U.S. jet. Meanwhile, Russia's ruling party lawmaker Andrei Lugovoy claims Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny's alleged poisoning can be a possible provocation by the West. Addressing the media, Lugovoy said Western leaders' immediate responses to Navalny's illness raises suspicions. He said German Chancellor Angela Merkel and the EU representatives released aggressive anti-Russia statements soon after Navalny's illness was made public. Lugovoy said the entire situation seems like a well-orchestrated campaign to target Moscow. Russia's State Duma deputy leader blamed Germany for starting a politically motivated campaign against Moscow. Earlier, Germany called on Russia to support EU's probe into Navalny's alleged poisoning. Now, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation has condemned the desecration of Holy Quran in Sweden. The General Secretariat OIC said the event was a provocative offense deliberately intended to outrage the Muslims. The OIC's Islamophobia Observatory appreciated the firm action taken by the Swedish government against the perpetrators. It also urged the country's Muslim community to exercise restraint, avoid violence and abide by the country's law. The OIC affirmed it will continue to support efforts to tackle Islamophobia through the implementation of UN Human Rights Commission's resolutions. Earlier, the far-right activists burned a copy of Quran in the Swedish city of Malmö, sparking riots and unrest. Now, South Korea's government has warned the striking doctors of legal consequences if they refuse to return to work. The government says the doctors risk prison terms, cancellation of their licenses and fines of up to $25,000. Prime Minister Chung Sae-kyung pressed doctors to come to the negotiating table. Chung urged the Korean Intern and Resident Association to scrap their strike as he lashed out at them for turning a blind eye to the patients. He said the government has no choice but to react in line with the law and principle to protect the lives of people amid pandemic. The association says the government should reconsider its plans, otherwise it will continue the strike indefinitely. The Korean Medical Association has ended its three-day walkout for now, but threatens to go on an indefinite strike on the 7th of September. Meanwhile, China and France have agreed to maintaining and practicing multilateralism as their common responsibility and top priority. This comes as Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi meets French counterpart Jean-Yves Le Drian in Paris. The Chinese Foreign Minister made a 4-point proposal for Beijing and Paris. Wang said both sides need to adhere to concept abide by agreements and strengthen institutes related to multilateralism. For his part, Le Drian said France-China relations are very close and their cooperation is showing a good momentum for development. He said both should reinforce cooperation on climate change and jointly promote the development of the global digital economy. The French minister said Paris is willing to work with Beijing to reach an EU-China investment agreement as soon as possible. China's autonomous region, Tibet, has been at the forefront of the country's efforts to promote green development. China has made remarkable advancement in the conservation of the ecosystem over the past 5 years. This report has details.
China has stepped up protection of Tibet's natural resources such as grasslands, wetlands and forests. In Lhasa city, the area of water bodies in the Lalu Wetland National Nature Reserve has been expanded around 30%. This increased the number of migratory birds to over 15,000. The efforts resulted in the steady growth of Yunhua snub-nosed monkey, a severely endangered species. The steps to protect the ecosystem have greatly improved people's well-being.
We have felt continued improvement in the sanitation, ecology, and infrastructure in the Lalu Wetland Reserve whenever we come for a walk and fresh air. The environment is better and our sense of happiness is stronger.
The reserve is also home to other animals such as clouded leopard, snow leopard, and wild ox. On the whole, some 440 kinds of vascular plants and nearly 160 types of vertebrates have been found in the reserve. In the past 5 years, Lhasa has achieved a green transformation through afforestation and management of its water resources.
We've connected the Potala Palace and the Norbulinka Palace to World Cultural Heritage Sites through the expansion of our river system, which covers a combined 72.24 kilometers with the newly added 36-kilometer long water bodies measuring 26 hectares in total.
In Tibet, a total of 538,800 square kilometers in 74 counties and districts have been designated for ecological conservation. It has also built 47 nature reserves of various types with a combined area of 412,200 square kilometers. The Chinese authorities have invested about $9 million to improve infrastructure in the reserve.
And now it's time for the weather updates. Well, that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Take care.